Hi, dear professor. I'm going to introduce two paintings by David Hockney, who is one of the pioneers of the Cubism, the movement of Cubism. So he also he often used integrated method to create his painting, including photographic collage, advertisement posters, and landscape paintings. And the variation made him a enduring influence on the 20th century of modern art. So I'm going to introduce two of his pop art works. The first one is A Bigger Splash. The second one is American Collectors, as you can see from the picture. So let's start from The Bigger Splash. We can clearly see the perspective and depth in the painting. When we first take a look at this painting, the diving board is the closest to us, and the chair at the back is furthest to us. So it forms a perspective in depth. So the distance of this depth can be told as what we see in a three-dimensional world, but it's represented onto a two-dimensional artwork. And also we can see the same technique on the American Collectors, the painting American Collectors. So the tree is clearly in front of this column, this artwork. And we can, if we see it with a two-dimensional perspective, we can tell that this is a trapezoid. But if we see it with a three-dimensional perspective, the trees would be in front of this column. So this is the manifestation of the use of the perspective in depth in a artwork. But there are also differences in the use of perspective in depth, such as when we see this shadow over here, we can see the contrast of the colors that's behind the woman and what's beside the woman. The dark color represents the shadow of the woman, but at the back of the woman there is a space. So it represents a distance between the woman and the building, the exhibition building. So the contour lines of this painting is very clear. And also we can tell that it is a three-dimensional painting. There's a three-dimensional effect that is created by these contour lines and the contrast in the colors, dark color and the bright color. So from a distance, we can easily see that the woman is in front of the building. However, in the bigger splash, the only thing we can see that's in front of the house is the chair. If we take a closer look, there's much less contour lines in this painting than the American Collectors, especially if we can take a closer look at the parameter of the balcony window. There's only color difference, but there's no lines to define the difference of these two colors to make to serve as a boundary of between these two colors. So we can tell that we cannot tell if it's in two-dimensional or in three-dimensional. And we can also see this grass. We cannot tell if it's the paint on the wall or if it's a real grass that is planted on the ground, because it's just flat and there's no contour lines to represent, or shadow or color variation to represent the that it is a three-dimensional object. I think that's the difference in perspective of depth. And secondly, the bigger splash, we can see that the details in bigger splash is represented with a thick brush stroke in the center of the splash, and the minor minor splash is represented with thinner contour lines. And we can see that the splash is created just like what we see in real life in nature, including the color variations. Like there's a bright side, like the bright part of the splash, and here is a darker part of the splash. So we can tell that it is what we see in real life on a picture, but it's represented in with brush strokes. However, if we take a look at the background, we don't see much detail that is depicted onto the background. They're all in two-dimensional, and they're basically all are regular shape, like rectangle, this house, and this rectangle, there are rectangles that forms the balcony window. And there is a rectangle that forms a platform of the perimeter of the swimming pool. We cannot tell if it's flat or in three-dimensional. But if we can see this picture, we can, if we don't see the title of the picture, we do not know that these two person are the main character of this painting, because they're all depicted in details, including the main characters and the objects. They're all depicted in detail, in the same amount of detail. So we cannot tell what is the artist want to emphasize in this painting. Maybe that's what he want to express, is that they're all the same. The collectors and the objects that they collect are all the same position, their upright position, and they're all static. They're not moving. However, in this painting, we can see that the splash is in a motion, but what is appears at the background, they're all static. The only thing in motion is the splash. You can see it's represented with these brush strokes, different brush strokes. That represents that the splash is just happened. It's like you took a quick snapshot of this splash. So if we take a first look, we will know that this is the main character. If we take the first look of the of these painting, American collectors, it would be, there's no emphasis in this painting. So last but not least, in this painting, we can also find a very distinctive thing is that so these objects are basically there are cutouts from another painting and it's pasted onto the same painting of this picture of this work and because it appears very unnatural at the parameter of this object. Maybe that's another manifestation of the photographic collage. So it's basically represented with cutouts. In this painting, we do not see such cutouts. It is painted with brush strokes and including the big splash. It's also painted with brush strokes. So that's another difference. So all in all, and the paintings are in the same style, but it's depicted with different techniques, and it can also represent different meanings in this painting. So that's all. Thank you. Thank you for listening.